The patch notes for the full release of Darkest Dungeon 2 just dropped, and let me tell you, we have a lot to talk about. This is a serious bunch of changes that Red Hook are hitting us with, and we have a ton to talk about. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to apologize to start out here because I was painting rooms all day today and I didn't think that Red Hook was going to hit us with the 1.0 patch notes early. So I was caught flat-footed, but I've collated everything, I've put everything together, and I am ready to talk about all of the changes. So let's do it. Headlining features. Red Hook called out 3 of them. The first is that there is the new playable class, the Flagellant. We talked about them in the previous video. Looking very interesting. The Flagellant has pivoted from Bleed to Blight, and we're going to be seeing a lot more of them, and apparently Death is going to be chasing us as we put them through their paces. And the other 2 headlining features are Act 4 and Act 5, which are going to come with bosses for each of those confessions, unique ordainments, also unique torch effects. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Story content beats, and we do have an ending cinematic that we are hopefully going to be checking out day after tomorrow when the game launches on Monday. But in addition to these 3 headlining features, they also hit us with a massive list of other changes that we have to go through. The first thing that they highlight is that the tutorial has been updated, so they've done a lot of work rebalancing the denial confession to make it feel more introductory, adding tutorial beats, prologue, a lot of different things just to make the game more inviting to people who haven't put 500 hours into the early access. They've added cosmetic unlocks, so we're going to be able to customize the color palettes of our heroes and the weapon kits that they are wielding. This is kind of a prequel to what is coming in the future, which will be the ability to unlock the story skins for the heroes. Also, infernal and radiant torches have gotten an overhaul and are looking very exciting. We'll talk a lot about those. There's a new deliverable item. It is highly depressing, but you will be able to carry the remains of a hero that died to the next inn in order to collect some extra candles. Oof. Corpse art has also dropped. This is something I've talked about in my streams that I thought might be working on kind of in the background. Very excited about this. The art is so incredible in Darkest Dungeon 2, and I think having some corpse art is going to be really fun. Next up, we have the flame gameplay effects now vary by confession. I mentioned that just a moment ago, but depending on what confession you are in, your flame going low or being high is going to have different effects, presumably both on the enemies and on your heroes. You will be able to remap your key bindings in the new version. Pretty interesting. Then mouse-only controls. This one actually caught me off guard because if I am being honest, I am not sure what you couldn't do in Darkest Dungeon without a keyboard. Maybe you couldn't drive the stagecoach? Hard to say. They also have added a bunch more language support. Korean, Japanese, Ukrainian, and simplified Chinese speakers will be enjoying Darkest Dungeon 2, probably enjoying my video a little bit less. And then an inordinate amount of new barks will also be coming. So this patch is brimming with a lot of things. A few more things than I speculated when I did my my previous video talking about what I thought was going to be in this patch. I was correct about almost all the things that we saw here, but there are quite a few other nice to haves. So without further ado, let's start digging into them. The first thing that we need to talk about is the new player experience. As I mentioned, we are going to be seeing a kind of tutorialization happening. So they're going to add a lot more tutorial beats. They also say that your first expedition is going to be particularly tailored to really ease players into it. And then they will move into the confession denial, which is the first one. And that confession is also going to be tutorialized. It's going to be much more simple, and you're going to have a lot less choices and a lot less requirements to defeat it. Also, all the tutorial events and informations have been revised, and tutorial events now trigger more contextually and are spaced out over time, which I think is going to be a really nice thing. And they've added a bunch of videos to make the tutorial events better depict information. I think this is all really great. I am excited for new players to get into the game and try it out. I think with the launch on Steam, we're going to be seeing a ton of new players coming into Darkest Dungeon 2, and if the experience is welcoming, that's good for everyone. On to the denial confession. So as I was mentioning, this is kind of part of the tutorialization. So denial has been restructured to be more friendly to new players and provide a smoother learning experience. So it's only going to be 2 regions instead of 3. So it is a shortened campaign. It will always be Sprawl and Tangle. And then the denial boss does not require a trophy, so you'll be able to enter the mountain without fighting the librarian or the general. The shackles of denial have been rebalanced to be a bit easier. And then last but not least, you won't run into any champions or an antiquarian. So you won't be messing with presumably the knight or the bishop. You'll be dealing with a subset of the enemies from both the sprawl. You won't have to deal with her ladyship either, presumably. And then they say that there are a number of other balance changes that are designed to make the difficulty escalation between the confessions feel more meaningful, rather than it just being like denials maybe a little easier or they're all about the same difficulty, which is what I would argue, with Focus Fault being a bit of a step up. Now there's going to be more of a progression, which I think is going to feel really good for new players. You're going to be running into new challenges that require you to up your game and improve your gameplay. Next up, we need to talk about the cosmetic unlocks. So each hero is going to have 3 new color palettes and 3 weapon kits available on the new mountain subscreen at the Altar of Hope. So you'll be able to unlock those, and then once they are unlocked, when you go to the crossroad, you will be able to select from all of the new fly drip that your heroes have access to. Next up, this is a big one. So the Infernal and Radiant Flames. This is perhaps Red Hook's first really exceeds expectation in my eyes. So the Radiant Infernal Flames will allow you to customize the difficulty of the game. The Radiant Flame is available at the Valley Inns and gives various gameplay boosts that can help you to overcome the confessions. So it's basically making the game a little bit easier, kind of like Radiant mode in Darkest Dungeon 1 did. Furthermore, each time you fail a confession, the Radiant Flame gets stronger and stronger. It does reduce the number of candles that you get, but this feels like something where they don't want players hitting their head over and over again against these bosses. They want people to be able to play through the game, and having a failure lead to an increase in power for your heroes seems like a really nice way to do it. I think this is actually a very smart direction to take the Radiant Flame. By contrast, the Infernal Flame makes the game harder, and there are 5 in total, each with a specific theme. Infernal Flames are unlocked at the Altar of Hope. Mounting them will give you a candle scoring bonus at Expedition End and also bragging rights. We will be playing with some Infernal Flames, maybe not on our first stream on Monday. We may focus on actually getting some wins in Act 4 and maybe even seeing the Act 5 boss or beating it. Who knows? But I love this concept of there being multiple Infernal Flames. They actually showed a screenshot of it, which I'll switch to here, where they show both the Radiant Flame and the Infernal Flame, which you presumably will have access to at the first inn. The thing that I am noticing here, and this is the head scratcher, is they mentioned that there are 5 Infernal Flames, but it appears that you may randomly be given 1 and have to decide if you can make it work. So there's going to be an interesting discussion to be had about which of the Infernal Flames are more punishing, which are easier, and then when is it a good idea to go for the Infernal Flame versus not. We also, at this point, don't know if the Infernal Flame is going to lock the torch at 1 again. This was more of a feature than a hindrance for the previous incarnation of the Infernal Flame, but we'll have to wait and see. We just don't know yet, but we will know very soon. So candle earning and the Altar of Hope. So first of all abandoned run candle penalties have been removed. I know that a lot of players are going to be really excited about this. They're essentially completely stripping away the punishing feeling of gambling, right? Previously, or in the early access, they talked a lot about this idea that they want people to have meaningful decisions to make. When they're at an inn, be like, I don't think I can make it. Maybe I shouldn't press forward. I would lose some candles. I think they've realized that that just feels really punishing and bad for people who are not good at determining whether they can succeed or not. And those people are generally inexperienced players, so it just feels bad. As a part of this as well, the Honor the Fallen concept comes in here, where you will be able to bring your dead hero's remains to the next inn in order to get some candles. I think this is a fun thing, especially if there is a specific hero remain for each hero. I'm hoping for that. I want Dismas's head again to show up, and for us to be able to bring it to the next inn. Might not happen exactly that way. And then the first time victory bonuses for each confession are going to be increased dramatically. That's a really nice touch. It's going to make it feel that much sweeter when you do get that first win. And then the increased region completion candle awards modestly, and the valley completion slightly. So basically, across the board, they're trying to give you more candles to kind of smooth out the meta progression. I think that's interesting. The second half of that is the Altar of Hope changes, where they say that overall the Altar of Hope's price audit, resulting in a reduction of many unlocks. Hero unlocks in particular are going to be more expensive, and I think they might be doing this just so that players don't come in and feel like they need to unlock all the heroes right away and have a whole bunch of heroes that they aren't familiar with, and instead kind of slow players down so they pick up a hero, they learn how to play it, and kind of go through that cycle, at least for new players. And then they've also pushed the Death Blow Resist upgrade to be the first upgrade after unlocking a hero. I think this is a good idea. Death Blow Resist is just one of those things that it feels very punishing for new players not to have Death Blow Resist. Like, you're essentially like, you're brand new, you haven't played a lot, you haven't done a lot of meta progression. Here's a hero that dies when the wind blows from the west. It's a little rough. I think it's a good idea to push it forward. They also say that you no longer need to spend candles to leave the altar. This one is really interesting. I think it is smart to be able to kind of like pool up your candles. I never liked the fact that every time I left, I was going to be losing all my candles. But from my perspective, that was mostly because I was waiting for new patches to come, and I wanted to have a pile of candles on hand so that I could unlock everything and move on. But I think generally speaking, this is going to be kind of a non-change. I think mostly players who have places to spend candles are going to want to spend them, and players who have unlocked everything are probably just going to turn into dragons and hoard all of their candles. Go figure. On to the miscellaneous balance changes. Relationships, blessed and cursed skills are now selected with weighted chance influenced by usage, meaning that the most used skills are more likely to be chosen. I made this one orange and not green simply because it applies both to blessings and curses, which means that the game is going to be doing nice things for you, but it is also going to be hitting you where it hurts. Very interesting one. Then they also mentioned that they did an enemy advantage tuning pass. No details were provided, so we simply don't know if that's good news or if we're going to be inundated with elites all of a sudden. Meltdown, hero stress now drops to 1. I believe previously it dropped to 0. I'm not sure why this change was made, but it's an interesting one. And then overstress, meltdown, or resolute will now confer a 3-round stress resist buff after. So basically, they don't want you chain meltdowning. I think this is going to be particularly useful, especially in boss fights where you have a tank that is getting absolutely wailed on. The stress is mounting over and over again. This is going to give you a little bit of respite right after you have that first meltdown. If you can get them off death's door, get them back up and running, this will be a nice thing. Resolute is now going to heal even more, 67%, and also give you a debuff resist. Again, an interesting, nice little change. I think they just want to make meltdowns or hitting the stress cap feel a little less punishing. And the meltdown affinity penalty is -3, down from -4 in early access, which means meltdowns are going to be slightly less punishing. The question that I'm very curious about is what happens to affinity when the person melting down is your flagellant? Because if that's harming affinities, that's going to make it very challenging to take advantage of the fact that the flagellant has that toxic specific class meltdown. More balance changes. They adjusted the overall affinity chance rates to try to reduce the current positive relationship heavy bias. This is fascinating to me. I would love to see the data that they are looking at that says, wow, current positive relationships are too easy to get. I feel like I fight really hard for the positive relationships that I create. But I will say I usually end most of my runs with my heroes near max relationships. But I think that's due to a lot of effort on my part and a lot of conscientiousness about the way that I approach the game. So it's interesting, but maybe there is more of a systemic bias towards positive relationships. Either way, I think on Monday, we're going to have a hard time building relationships based on this. Next up, champion monsters will no longer appear until the third confession. Probably should have labeled that green, but the short version is basically like her ladyship, the knight, all of those kind of like special, really mean enemies are not going to show up until the later confessions to kind of give players a break. As a side note, these champion monsters have also received a bit of a buff that we'll be looking at in a minute. And I think the purpose is they want them to feel more impactful. When you run into Bullseye Bill, I believe is his name, in the Tangle, they want it to strike a bit more fear into your heart. Blocked diseases from happening in the valley. I don't think I've ever gotten a disease in the valley, but the gaunt there do have a small chance of applying it. I think it would be really funny to get something like brittle bones in the very first zone and then have a hard time finding a hospital. Added more repair fight variety on the gaunt side. I've already seen some pretty terrifying repair fights, so I have this odd feeling that more variety is probably not a good thing for us players, but we'll have to wait and see on that. And then reduce the sluice appearance rate chance to 50% at any given inn. I don't know what the percentage was before. I wish they had one of those like parentheticals that called out the specific amount that the sluice chance was before. I always found that I would be able to find a sluice in any given run. And I'm curious if this is going to push us to a point where sometimes you just don't have the option to go to the sluice. That's the way it's kind of feeling. Assist, resist, cultists, and oases. Added various quirk-driven choices. We like that. More quirk interactions with events on the road is always fun. Quirk-driven choices in encounters now show the name of the quirk that caused it. This is going to be so fantastic for us learning more about the game. Often these things feel very kind of like hidden and confusing, and I love the idea that I'm going to be able to mouse over it and be like, oh, it was robust that caused this oasis interaction. And then last but not least, they say there's a new logic for the choice selection, which will ensure that at least one hero will want to interact with the encounter. This is very exciting because if you've ever run into a situation where you have to do, say, 4 resistance encounters in a region, and you get to the last of the 4, it's the last one on the map, and all of a sudden you're like, none of my heroes want to fight here. This means that someone will always want to. The danger here is that there's going to be more disagreement about fighting, or about not just fighting, but any of these events, because you are guaranteed to have at least one person that wants to do it, which means you'll never have kind of a unanimous opt-out. As they mention here, this is particularly interesting for the academic study because it means at least one hero is always going to want to touch the Shambler orb. Good news, or maybe not, because there are also some changes to the Shambler coming down the pike. The academic studies apparently got a lot of love in this patch. There was a thorough revamping of all academic studies to ensure that they all are generally beneficial, although not without some risk of downside, right? So academic studies are not going to be free real estate, but we're also going to have more benefit broadly. Audited and redistributed which of the studies appear in which regions to give more region identity. I didn't actually know that there was any connection between regions and what study showed up there. So this is just, it's news to me, and I guess now we have to start learning about it. The academic study type can now be scouted and will appear on the minimap. This is super cool. Again, I love the idea that I can be like, oh, that's a Shambler over there, and make decisions based on that. And then they're also adding some new items that will be exclusive to specific academic studies, including a new food item, a new combat item, and a new trinket. Super excited to see what these are. Anytime new items are showing up in the game, we're excited about it. And the academic studies have already been pretty fun. I generally wouldn't go out of my way for them, but I think now there's going to be probably some real gems that we're excited to get. And with the additional scouting information, we may have the intel we need to know that, oh, if I go there, I might get the new food that is particularly valuable. As for hero stories, some really interesting changes here. So first of all hero stories got some improvements to make them more understandable, add some clarity to them. That's fantastic. But then this one's an interesting one. Hero shrines will no longer generate if all heroes in the current party have completed their backstories. So that means no more free mastery from hero shrines once you've unlocked all of the story beats of all of your heroes. And then the last part, and I probably shouldn't have labeled this red, but is now for any hero that if you have a team and some of them are not unlocked, the ones who are completely unlocked will have an exit option that does not earn a mastery. So it does feel like it's potentially an unforced error if you say, let's say I'm playing tomorrow or the day after, and I have a flagellant on my team. Everybody else is fully unlocked. We go to a hero shrine and I accidentally click on the highwayman, forgetting that I actually have a hero that needs it. I will apparently not get a mastery and just get an exit prompt. Interesting. I don't think it's a big deal. I probably won't make that mistake because I'm very excited to see all of the flagellant skills in action. So hero goals, barks, and deliverables. So in terms of hero goals, they've added new goals for each hero skill and using each hero skill. And they've also said that hero goals that require skill use will now only generate when that skill has been unlocked. Smart. It would be a bummer to be like, oh, my plague doctor has to use plague grenade, and I have not unlocked that yet. As for barks, they've added an absolute ton of new lines for all the characters, many edits for barks when using in items. Seems cool. They add a lot of flavor to the game. I'm excited to see all the new barks. And then the deliverable items added a chance for the locked strong box to drop from swine enemies. So locked strong box, say that 10 times fast, is an item that you bring to the next inn and you get a reward for it. It will be fun to see this coming out of the sluice. It's another reason to be excited to go to the sluice and another potential incentive beyond picking up that 1 or 2 mastery for the free region. New items and shops. So they say they added new items, added some curio items, and added a new combat item, Shred of Decency, to help cultists against cultists worship. Very interesting. I presume this is going to remove worship tokens from cultists, which is interesting. And, I could see it being used simply because you generally know when you're coming up against a cultist, and you could be like, okay, we're coming up against the exemplar. Let's put on some shreds of decency. As for shops, Whiskey Flask will now always be available at the inn. The Hoarder will now feature an additional selection of vague and distant trinkets. I believe those are the 2 lesser trinkets. So we're going to see more of the middle range of trinkets, and then rearrange the shop selection for the Field Hospital, Inn, and Hoarder to be a little more friendly. I think that's just a cosmetic change. Guardian fights and pets. The Guardian fight is now going to give you relics and baubles. That'll be a nice little cash infusion right before you go to the inn. And then as for the pets, we saw a few pets that they felt like, I guess, were underperforming get some buffs. The Pygmy Pliskin has an increased healing received bonus, and also the random hero heal after locations is now 10%. That's going to be pretty meaningful. I have yet to play with the Pliskin, but I am looking forward to it. The Larval Carrion Eater increased the heal from it from 15 to 30%, and now provides a crit token when landing the killing blow on a corpse. This seems fun. I like that idea, and I think it could be really cool, and I think it pairs really well with the General's Immobilized trophy because it increases your damage against corpses by so much. The Hatchling Crocodilian increased damage bonus when moving from 2 to 3%. So for juggle comps, this is going to be a little more effective. I'm starting to get excited about the Hatchling Crocodilian. I think it does have a downside, if I recall correctly, like a minus speed when moving. That still makes me a little nervous. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see about that one. So some changes to combat items. First of all, the stress from horror on the blood is now 100%. I think that's a perfectly fair balancing step, given that the blood is so good. The bone saw is now 12 relics as opposed to the 35 baubles. I think that's going to make it much more attainable and interesting to pick up, because for rank 0 enemies, it's still a rather large nuke with a decent amount of bleed on it. And then last, chalk dust is now available in the default item pool. It ignores dodge and applies a debuff preventing stealth for 2 turns. I could see myself using this new version of chalk dust in the sluice to stop those pesky swine folk from stealthing up. I'm forgetting the name of that particular one. We'll get to the pigs in a second. And then as for stagecoach items, they are now purchased with the baubles along with price adjustments. That's very interesting. That's a huge balance change, because now your baubles are going to be used for trinkets, and they're also going to be used for your stagecoach items. Storage trunk has been returned to its former glory, or partially former glory, at providing 3 trunk spaces. And then the surgeon's mixing kit has an increased chance for healing items. Which brings us to the in-item changes, and there's some exciting ones in here. First of all, the Book of Body Tales now increased its stress healing to 6 and was made a little more expensive. Pretty decent change. Poetry now targets 2 instead of 1 enemy and adds an affinity. I'm very excited about this change to poetry. Even though the stress heal is a little bit less, poetry is going to be high on my list of things to hang on to, because you're getting an affinity and 8 stress healing across 2 targets for 16 gold. Poetry is very good. It's basically like pipeweed, but better. And pipeweed is now worse, but we'll get to that in a second. Holy Beads now has a punching bag built in, round start, dodge 5%. Seems fine, very unimpactful. The Mop and Bucket, an item that I basically would never use because of its potential danger, now comes with a round start chance of strength and also a round start chance of dodge. I probably won't use Mop and Bucket still, but there might be certain circumstances where I roll the dice on it. Pipeweed. Now, smoking the pipeweed is going to give you -1 stress, or excuse me, -1 speed, in addition to the stress healing capabilities of it and the affinity gain capabilities. Playing cards, I think they probably recognized that no one was using them. Now the chance of affinity positive is all the way up to 75%, and there is a reduction in the chance for the -1 affinity of 25%. So basically 75% of the time, playing cards are going to be good for you. This might be worth using once again. The playing cards also have the ability to give you Tactical Thinker, among other things, so there's some good quirks that you can get out of playing cards. As for the future, or excuse me. As for more in items, the Songbook of Amherst Ballads has been improved to be 80% chance for +3 affinity and -1 20% of the time, which seems fantastic. Songbook of Amherst Ballads is going to be one that I'm definitely going to keep an eye out for. 80-20, that's them's good betting odds. The Songbook of Touching Dirges has seen its chance for +2 affinity increased to 80 and the -1 chance reduced to 20. This blows my mind, because Songbook of Touching Dirges was already perhaps my single favorite relationship building item, because it was already so reliable, but apparently they decided to make it even better. I'm not going to complain. As for Stew, they mentioned that it's increased stacking to 4 and now provides 1 speed. The thing that they don't mention here that I'm curious about is its increased stacking to 4 because it now only targets 1 hero? Previously, Stew was something that applied to everyone. Or do you get potentially 4 of them stacked and they all apply to the whole group, and this is more of a play to take advantage of some of those new synergies with carrying food or something like that? I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see. And then last but not least, the Whiskey Barrel took a hit in the form of it apparently causing more brawls. So now 67% of the time it will give you the +3 affinity, and 33% of the time it will give you the -2. I will probably still roll the dice on Whiskey Barrel just because it comes with a healthy stress reduction as well. The in items keep going. Next up, we have the whiskey bottle, not barrel, which again saw the same treatment as the whiskey barrel, except it is targeted on 2 heroes and it's the 6733. Whiskey bottle taking a hit is a bit of a bummer. Whiskey Flask, though very interesting here, no longer targets a single hero and now targets 2 and adds 1 affinity. So Whiskey Flask kind of becomes the new pipeweed in my eyes. Wax Inoculant no longer has a chance to apply any diseases. I didn't actually remember that it did that. It's a very low percentage, and I always roll the dice, especially if I'm going into the sluice. And then last but not least, the Tar-Filled Columbre, I think that's how you pronounce that, now provides +3 burn dealt and +3 burn received while in stealth instead of 100% burn resist piercing. I put 3 question marks and 3 exclamation points because I am sitting here being like, was this in the game or was this a change that they forgot to remove from their internal testing? I have not seen this item before. I am interested to see it when it surfaces, though. Now on to trinkets. The Empty Stein, the strength token from Barbaric Yop, is now guaranteed. Thank goodness. This was one of the things that I complained about endlessly in my tier list. There's all these kind of needless, like 66% chance of a strength token. You don't need to do that. Just make it predictable. Rotten Tomato, though, completely transformed here. So the rank 1 debuff is now disease resist rather than death blow. Huge. I think that's really amazing. The rank 2 bonus has changed from 25 to 30%. So if you're in rank 2, 30% damage. The combo token from breakthrough skills is now guaranteed, and breakthrough skills now apply 1 random negative token. This seems really good. This seems really, really, really good, especially if the skill breakthrough applies that random negative token to the enemy. I labeled it red here, but now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, I don't know who that negative token is going on. And if it's going on the targeted enemy, that makes it very exciting and makes breakthrough, which has changed incidentally, very interesting. The Seaman's Boots gets a nice little buff to 66% from 50. Feels really good. Storage Room Key. The block and regen are now guaranteed. Very exciting. Storage Room Key may actually be viable as a Plague Doctor trinket to kind of like move away from healing with your battlefield medicine and instead using emboldening vapors, I believe, is the thing that the storage room key changes. You'll now be able to apply regen with it. Very exciting. And then Strong Shackles gets a very minor increase to the immobilization that comes with that chance. Not sure why we care, but cool, it's there. More trinkets. Carved Toy, chance for the crit token on turn end, change to turn start. This is amazing. This makes it the same as Rat Skull and Snappy Swig. Much, much preferred to waiting until the end of turn. Pile of Ash changed Backdraft plus 50% crit to Backdraft applies stealth. This is interesting. I think that the Runaway still lacks stealth synergy in my eyes to make this useful or exciting, but maybe someone's going to figure out how to make the stealth Runaway work, and we'll all be really excited to pick up Pile of Ash. The Uncommon Seashell also gets a change. This seems like a net positive because instead of you taking 2 damage, which if you're on Death's Door might just kill you, now you will just gain a bleed 15% of the time. Much less punishing, much less likely to create unnecessary deaths. We already like Uncommon Seashell, plays really well with the Poet Leper, so we're excited to see that. Next up, we have Inevitable End. It changes the break skill from ignoring 66% of death blow to break skill cannot causes the enemy not to be able to gain block for 2 rounds. Seems interesting. And then they also changed it, and this is the one that's very exciting. So when your speed is less than 2, remove 1 weak token and 1 vulnerable token. The reason that they did this is that Inevitable End was basically unusable because remove 2 negative tokens would remove Taunt. The only thing I'm sad to see here is I would have liked to have seen blind included in the things that are being removed. The reason that I think it's not is because this is, at the end of the day, a leper trinket, and getting rid of blind, you're really meant to play around it with combo rather than removing your blind. But anyways, inevitable end, much more interesting trinket than it was previously. More trinkets. Inert Indica added gain on days resist 1 positive token. Seems great. Excited to play around with that. I think it might be more viable now. Selfish Motivation. Increased damage bonuses per negative token from 30 to 50%. Negative tokens gained on turn start are now guaranteed. I think this is a good change for this archetype. Again, this trinket really, from my perspective, only works on lepers because of the high percentage chance that you're going to be picking up blinds, and very few other people have ways to handle blinds. But nonetheless, 50% per negative token is a lot. So there might be something to be said for Selfish Motivation. Snap Judgment, the trinket that I have no idea how it ever made it into the game in the first place. It previously gave you plus 10 speed, a speed token, and minus 75% healing received. No idea why anyone would want this. Going first is not useful unless you can pair it with trinkets that benefit you when you go first, like Rat Skull or things like that. Or Smoldering Hymnal is another good example. But like, you can't use them because Snap Judgment requires 2 trinket slots. Though the new one says turn start plus 1 speed, so you get faster and faster. And turn start, if speed is greater than 8, add a positive token. If speed is greater than 12, remove combo and an extra action 10% of the time. And then turn end, if last in the turn order, add 1 negative token. This is really interesting. I think Snap Judgment now plays well with hero paths that give speed. So I think that there's something to be said for this. I think that if you have a relatively fast hero, like whichever the speedy, I always forget, I think it's the Virtuoso Jester is the one that's speedy. Snap Judgment, you could potentially get to that 8 and that 12 speed within most fights, and then you're potentially picking up some extra actions. Snap Judgment might not be trash anymore. Who knows? Spoken Sharply is the next cultist trinket to get some changes. Gain on hit, heal increased from 3 to 4, and the max HP penalty reduced to 33. I might try this out on someone like a Poet Leper with pretty large health pool anyways. You're probably still sitting, once you do minus 33, you're probably sitting at like 40, 35 hit points, 40 hit points. And if every time you get hit, you're healing for 4, that could be pretty good. Temptation gets worse. So now either you're going to get an extra action or you're going to take 1 damage. I think this is still okay, but it's a little scary because, as a reminder, the other piece of Temptation is you have no death blow resist, so that 1 damage, if you're at what hit point, is literally fatal. The stress resist Dark Impulse has been improved so that only 25% of the time you take a damage. Seems good. And the Heart-Shaped Padlock had a weird health pool requirement on it that has now gone away, but the Resolute bonus has been reduced from 25 to 10%, and on Resolute, you get 2 tokens. This is pretty cool. One thing that I'm very curious about is, does Toxic on the Flagellant count as Resolute, in which case they would get 2 positive tokens. We'll have to test that out to see. If Toxic ends up being a negative, but a negative with not as bad a downside, this would not be interesting for the Flagellant because you would never get the tokens. So, some miscellaneous stuff about region modifiers, goals, and combat. So Bat Country and a Moment's Peace, Bat Country will not appear in Region 1, and a Moment's Peace will not appear in tandem with Drought. I don't remember exactly what those two do, but I assume they were kind of like at odds or conflicting. In terms of combat changes, Stealth will no longer protect the last hero/monster on a team from attacks if they are the only remaining valid target. This is spooky, right? It's very good news for times when you have like that one remaining pig and you can't, and it's just sitting in the front line and it stealths and you can't do anything and all of your heroes have to pass or something like that because you have the General's Trophy. But the flip side is, I assume the reason that they did this is some people were doing some cheeky things where they were hiding from enemies for long periods of time, stalling out fights, and eventually winning. So that's, I don't know, that's something that's interesting. Then Meltdown Affinity Penalty has been reduced from -4 to -3. This is a nice change. Meltdowns were very punishing. They remain very punishing at -3, but not quite so bad. In terms of quirks and diseases, we have some minor changes. Deathless is now Defiant. Deathless is the one where you heal every turn. And then Sepsis has been renamed to Hemic Rot. Sepsis was a pretty bad one. I don't remember exactly what it does, but it is not pleasant. Okay, hero changes. I can't believe we still have a lot more to do here. This patch is massive. So the Grave Robber gets a mountain of changes. Lunge gets worse with an even bigger damage range because it wasn't big enough already. Thrown Dagger, similarly. Oh, actually, wait. This was an improvement to Thrown Dagger. Sorry, I should not have labeled that red. It actually gets its minimum damage increased. Glint in the Dark gets improved. Glint in the Dark Plus gets improved. Both of them have a larger range. Then we have some Deadeye specific changes where Lunge is getting it's getting tightened up, so its damage range is a little tighter. And then Deadeye is also getting Thrown Dagger increased to be 5 for 8. That seems quite nice. And then also Glint in the Dark is getting improved. So the Deadeye is seeing a little bit of a shift up in damage. The Nightsworn is also seeing a shift up in its lunge damage. Same with Venom Drop. So basically what we're seeing is like the default Grave Robber is taking a bit of a hit in terms of range, and then that's being restored through the various paths. I think this is part of their larger process of rebalancing the heroes as they kind of do the path overhaul to make everyone look like the Vestal. But overall, I think this is a net positive for the Grave Robber, but I hate to see the damage ranges increasing on any part of the Grave Robber simply because the Grave Robber is already very inconsistent if you're not landing lots of crits. Now on to the Hellion. Hellion gets some big changes here, and I'm pretty excited about them. I think this is going to make the Hellion a much more dynamic hero to play with. First of all, Bloodlust and Bloodlust Plus are going to last for 5 turns now, and Bloodlust Plus is going to give you 20% bleed resist in addition to removing bleeds. Breakthrough has been reworked completely as a high mobility, so I'm guessing plus forward 2 is my guess. Single target defense breaker, so it will be ignoring and also removing block. Howling End no longer ignores block, so essentially that functionality is being shifted to Breakthrough. So Howling End is no longer ignoring block. Howling End Plus no longer ignores block or guard. And Howling End now moves you back 1 rank. If it bleeds, is seeing a damage increase, and same with its plus version. And then if it bleeds is also getting more crit, and it's going to be bleeding for 4, which is pretty substantial. So to talk about this for a second, kind of at the 10,000 foot view, the way I see them reworking Hellion here is Hellion is now a juggle comp member from my perspective. Between Breakthrough and Howling End, I see the Hellion kind of like their sweet spot being sort of rank 2. Sometimes they use Howling End, which shifts them back to 3, and then they use Breakthrough to move back to 1, and then they kind of start repeating that process. But with If It Bleeds having that nice dot associated with it, there's a lot of interesting things, and I think building Hellions is going to be a lot more fun. But this does radically change kind of the old identity of Hellion lives in rank 1 and just presses buttons to make big damage. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I do not have a good handle on what the Hellion is going to look like. The Highwayman, Tracking Shot now removes stealth, and Tracking Shot Plus increased duration of the dodge prevention to 2 rounds from 2 turns. I put this blue thing in here. They didn't mention this, but this is a very interesting change for fights where a particular enemy has lots of turns every round. So for instance, the Librarian has 3 actions every round. P.S. I have a guide coming out for the librarian tomorrow. So if you're curious about how to go about killing the librarian, that's a great place to start. Wait for that one to come out. Hit the sub button if you are so inclined. But this is really interesting because this means that the librarian, who has several abilities that generate dodge, is going to be out of commission for 2 turns. Is it worth the tempo loss of not, say, pistol shotting for a turn? I don't know yet, but maybe. Maybe if the rest of the team is really popping off, it could be worth it. I'm not convinced, though. We'll have to do some science. Plague Doctor and Vestal. So, cause of death is no longer subject to crit and damage adjustment and penalties from trinkets, quirks, and the like. Bummer. So, cause of death is fantastic. It is a great skill. It is particularly potent against a certain third confession boss, and it's going to be sad to see it not benefiting from the damage modifications that we were using previously. I didn't take advantage of that much, so I'm not that worried about it. Generally, my Plague Doctors were more focused on applying a lot of dot and then using a unmodified cause of death, but I can see why people would go this way with it. Then we have the Vestal, fixed an issue that allowed some skills to incorrectly target corpses. Not sure what that is, honestly. And then also we have Illumination Plus, increase the duration of dodge prevention to 2 rounds from 2 turns. So much like we saw with the Highwayman, I think that this is potentially going to make Illumination a great skill to use on mobs like the Librarian, who you want to keep from generating a lot of dodge tokens. The Runaway, all kinds of things going on here. So I labeled this first one, even though it was a fix in red, because I had noticed previously that even when you missed hits on comboed enemies, you would get the fire on adjacent enemies with Ransack and Firefly. A bummer to see it go, but go figure. Backdraft and Backdraft Plus got the same treatment that Cause of Death did, where you're no longer going to be getting adjustments. I don't know that this was warranted because I wasn't using Backdraft very frequently, but who knows? Could be an important one moving forward. I think Cause of Death affecting all dots makes it significantly more interesting to play around with than Backdraft, which is only fire specific. That being said, Backdraft Plus, that is, now does do 100% of the burn value, which is good. That is an improvement. The Cultists, they're changing. Oh, yes, they are. So in general, for Cultists, ambushes at Torch 0 and Confession 1 will no longer include Deacons and Cardinals. That's just a nice thing. And in Confession 5, that same ambush at Torch 0 is going to hit you with an Exemplar. So buckle up, bucko. Slightly increase the chance of a Cardinal appearing in the second Oblivion's Rampart. Bummer. I always prefer Deacon to Cardinal. And slightly decreased chance of an altar spawning at rank 1 at the second Oblivion's Rampart. I don't think I've seen this a lot, so I think it was already somewhat rare. I labeled it as red just because, I don't know, you can potentially blow something up in rank 1 a lot easier, and altars are generally a good candidate for that. Next up, the Evangelists. They are getting an increase in HP to 28, but they no longer spawn with a with a dodge token. I think this is good for business. Like, those two combined, I would take any day. I think that dodge makes you more inconsistent, and I'd rather just hit them and probably do the 5 damage with my first attack, as opposed to missing and doing nothing. Then in Confession 1 and 2, they will spawn with a block token. And in Confession 3 or higher, they will have a block plus token in lieu of the dodge token. I think I prefer this, but it is... It does remove some RNG from them, which I think was important. Nocturnal Commune is going to grant block instead of dodge in Confessions 1 and 2, and then Nocturnal Commune will do block plus in place of dodge. The reason that I think that this is a net positive overall is we saw what happened with the Ghoul. The Ghoul used to create a bunch of dodge tokens, and it used to hurt a lot. Then they switched them over to block, and still annoying, less so. Rush Judgment, which is the Evangelist's back line, how do I get back to the front, is no longer going to grant a dodge either. So overall, Evangelists no longer dodgy. Cherubs and Heralds. Cherubs will spawn with dodge instead of dodge plus in Confession 1 and 2, and then Face Your Confession will grant dodge instead of dodge plus in Confessions 1 and 2. Confession 3 plus, presumably the Cherubs are going to remain unchanged. Then we have the Herald. Inversion is now limited to use in Confession 3 or higher. And Inversion is now a higher priority skill than the other attacks when available. I put the actual text of what Inversion does because I couldn't remember, because it doesn't happen all that frequently right now. Basically, I feel like Heralds are always doing their bagpipe stress attack, and I guess they're going to be doing Inversion a lot more if you are applying any tokens. Basically, what Inversion does is they move back one, they generate a worship, and they take everybody's tokens, all the weakness, vulnerable, and blind, take them onto itself, and then convert it over into positives. So Inversion is a powerful skill, and it makes the Herald a more interesting support. And maybe, just maybe, it also reduces the urgency with which I'm going to be going after them. I still think they're the first in the kill order, but maybe not. The Altar gets some big changes. So first of all, Flesh Weaving is now single target. I think this is maybe good, maybe not good. It depends on the fight, I think, basically, because the new version, let's talk about the new version. So the new version is a lot more regen. It's 6 in Confessions 1 and 2 and 10 on 3 plus. Flesh Weaving grants the Altar 1 block on Confession 1 and 2, and it grants block plus on Confession 3 plus. What this means is that it is a single target, much stronger ability for it to be doling out. And so that landing on a deacon or a cardinal is going to be tougher to deal with. Obviously, because there are 2 new confessions, we're going to have 2 new Altar of fill in the blank 1, fill in the blank 2. We'll find out what those are when we find out what those are. Bone Weaving now removes vulnerable tokens in Confession 4, and Bone Weaving removes weak tokens in Confession 5. The reason that I put these as yellow is I still think that removing blind tokens in Confession 3 is the scariest, because I think blind is so powerful, smoke bombs are so effective. But looking at this, we may get some hints, right? It may be that weak tokens are particularly strong in the 5th confession for some reason. You have somebody who's hitting particularly hard, and it benefits you to do that. Interesting. Gonna have to wait and see, but now we know. Vulnerable and weak are going to be less effective in the final 2 confessions. The Deacon and Cardinals are changing a little bit. First of all, the Deacon is not going to have Flesh Warps on Confession 1 and 2. I think this might be a mistake on Red Hook's part, not that they wrote this, but that they made this change, because I think that while it makes the Deacon easier, it also means that a very core mechanic of how you deal with the Deacon is going to kind of blindside people in Confession 3. I think that it's a core part of how you deal with the Deacon, from my perspective, is understanding Flesh Warps and how to work around it, how to, if it reduces range damage the first turn, you have your point blank shot Highwayman do take aim instead and prepare. Those types of things. It's a pretty core aspect of the Deacon that I think is going to catch people off guard when they eventually get there. The Cardinal is changing a lot. Some good and some bad here. First of all, they have a passive that when they are present, debuff resist on all other cultists is increased by 10. As long as you're on Confession 3 or beyond. Very interesting. And the rest of the changes are all around Entropic Star. First of all, it can't be used from the middle ranks, which I think is interesting. That means that potentially there's some shuffling that you can do to make it harder for it to do Entropic Star. And then second, it will only target 2 enemies rather than everybody. One of the things about the cardinal that has always been so frustrating, is it just hits everybody all the time. So it's nice that it has something that taunt will benefit you a little against it, those types of things. That being said, the chance of stress from entropic star is going up to 100%, and the damage is also increasing. So less targets, more damage, more stress. Bit of a mixed bag. I think overall the cardinal is going to remain the same power level, roughly. The exemplar gets a little bit easier, though. I was surprised to see this one. It will no longer receive ordainment in Confession 2, which I think is interesting. I'm not sure if they meant before Confession 2. But that's an interesting one. And then Rapturous Beauty, the damage is decreased to 2 to 4. It's essentially its 2 target stress attack. 4 to 8 was a lot of damage. So let's talk about the region enemies, because they're making a huge number of balance changes to the region enemies. First of all, we'll talk about the Sprawl. No more than one hero can receive combo at any given time while her ladyship is present. Your whippers are now going to be applying combo if her ladyship is around. Fantastic, fun. And then her ladyship is going to be using combustion a lot more. Combustion is the ability that requires combo. And combustion will now have an increased priority to be used. Combustion will not benefit from strength tokens. And combustion will have a cooldown. This is the maybe 3rd patch in a row where Red Hook has made changes to combustion, and I still rarely, if ever, see it. Hence the stop trying to make combustion happen, Red Hook. Although I think this time they may have done it. That first bullet point, increasing the priority, might mean we're going to see some combustions, and also I think targeting whippers early to prevent them from applying combo may be a good idea. And then this last one has me absolutely baffled. Librarian, book stacks will no longer die when the librarian is defeated. I think this is just like we're supposed to be saving the knowledge of the world, right? He's sitting there burning all of the knowledge of the world, and we're supposed to stop him. And so now the books, hooray, we saved the books. I don't know. I don't think it does anything, but maybe there's some interaction that I'm missing there. Let's move on to the Shroud. Looks like they are taking the first steps to making the Shroud slightly less of a power increase over other ones. So first of all, they've reworked the fog penalties. So the fog now will be a 33% chance of 1 stress, and there will be you will basically get 1 token, either a blind or a vulnerable, and 20% of the time you will get nothing. This is much better than the independent rolls that happened before, where you could end up getting a blind and a vulnerable token. We like that change. Also, the stress heal that comes after the fog lifts is now 25%, which means, interestingly, that there's a decent chance that with some beneficial rolling, if you actually can delay for the fog to lift, you might actually end up removing more stress than you gained. And then last, by claiming the Leviathan's trophy, the fog will stop happening. The fog, aka the Leviathan's breath, not happening after you've killed the Leviathan is something that I think people like me have been asking for a while. So we love to see that. Now on to some of the other enemies of the Shroud, or all of the enemies of the Shroud. The Bosun will be less likely to open with sodden rigging, which is nice because it's a stun attack. Stun attacks are frustrating to deal with. The Cabin Boy has adjusted arrangements of possible effects for unstable incubation. So when it does unstable incubation, it gains some tokens. Previously, it gained 2, and now it is only going to gain 1 token. The Fishmonger, aka Flen's Master Flex, Whetstone is now only available in rank 4. That is the one where it generates a crit token, so it will not be generating a crit token in rank 3, where it sometimes spawns. And Debone now applies weak 50% of the time, or vulnerable 50% of the time, and not both. Seems nice. And then your Wharf Rats have clearly taken some amphetamines or something, because they are now super speedy at 6 speed. The Leviathan is being made a bit easier. So first of all, there was some weird bug where Tokens, both positive and negative, could be consumed without being affected by his skills. I'm not sure what exactly they're referring to, but it's interesting. Breath of the Sea has been changed to be that one or the other type of thing rather than two independent roles. Very good news. Batter's stress damage has been reduced. That second stress from Batter was 66% of the time. So more than half the time Batter was doing 2 stress. This is a huge improvement to the stress that is coming out from Batter. Tidal Surge, stress damage chance has been reduced to 50 from 66. Eye of the Storm no longer ignores guard or stealth, and Undertow no longer ignores guard or stealth, which means that you're going to be able to, I think from my perspective, what this means is that if you have guard and you have a decent plan, getting one hero up to the move resist cap that has the ability to guard like a man-at-arms is going to be enough to handle a Leviathan, which I'm very excited about. I'm hoping that we can kill the Leviathan more frequently and get that on lock, because it's still the lair boss that I am most concerned about. I still kill it from time to time, but I enjoy it less than the other ones. Moving on to the Tangle. The Tangle, a lot is changing in the jungle. So let's talk about it all. So mashes have been heavily revised and adjusted. Mashes are their description for what combination of enemies appear together. So we're going to see some new combinations, which is exciting. The Arbalist just has some abilities that do not respect taunt, and now they will no longer consume taunt. Rather minor change. The Foot Soldiers, though, are going to be hitting harder, and their hits are now going to prevent block gain for 2 rounds. I think this is super fascinating. Atrophic Cut, which is their primary attack, is now potentially going to render your man-at-arms incapable of generating block with Retribution, or your Leper using Withstand. I think it's very interesting. It potentially is going to make it harder to heal through the Foot Soldiers' damage. The Bishop is getting massive changes. So the Bishop is like one of the supposed to be the big scary ones, and right now the current incarnation of the Bishop is basically like it does penance, it does damage to itself, and then it dies. It's not a very impressive hero or enemy. That is changing for sure with this. So now it is going to spawn with Benediction, which are the tokens that enable it to do the big scary things that it does. It's going to be a little faster, has more debuff resist. Serve Once More is now a high priority skill, so it's going to be bringing enemies back to life if you're not careful, and it has enough Benediction tokens. Serve Once More can now resurrect a drummer. Super annoying. Hope that never happens to me. Serve Once More can no longer be used in rank 1, so shuffling could be important potentially. Strike now moves the Bishop back 1, so it's going to have an easier time getting off of rank 1 if you shuffle it into that location. Penance is no longer self-damaging. Bummer. It's not going to be killing itself or nearly killing itself. Penance cannot be used in rank 1, so rank 1 is kind of a weak spot for it. Penance now, on average, still generates 2 tokens, but sometimes can low roll. Purge the Unworthy now has a cooldown of 1. Purge the Unworthy will now block dodge for 2 rounds. Interesting. Smite's average damage has been slightly increased, and Smite now has a cooldown of 1 turn. So overall, I think that the Bishop is a very interesting enemy now, and I think they're going to be a significantly bigger challenge for us to surmount. So I'm excited about that. I like the idea of the Bishop having a bit more intrigue and interest to them. The Drummer also gets a bunch of changes. Just wait, the Knight does too. Spoiler alert. But yeah, so Marching Orders speed boost is going to be a little less, and Marching Orders is now going to have a cooldown. Excuse me, little sneeze there. So Marching Orders is now going to have a cooldown, which is interesting. Marching Orders is the free ability that the Drummer does, so I guess it's only going to be doing it every other turn. Focus Fire now has a low chance of dealing 2 stress damage instead of 1. That's pretty annoying. Focus Fire is also more likely to target heroes at lower health. This can make for some really dangerous things. A bunch of Foot Soldiers that are hitting a little harder, preventing block from showing up, and now you have a Drummer that is applying focus fire with more discretion. It's starting to get a little spooky. Can't happen to rank 4, which in the scenario that I just described is basically good news because the focus fire targeting rank 4 was not useful, right? It was potentially putting taunt in a place where enemies couldn't follow up on that taunt. The order defensive formation has been reworked. We'll have to wait and see about that one. That previously gave some death blow and a few other things. Order volley removes blind from the arbalist, annoying. Slay the wounded removes weak from the knight, also annoying. But if the drummer is stunned, he will not attempt to issue orders. Also very interesting. That means no marching orders, no defensive orders, volley, or slay the wounded if you stun him. I don't remember what their stun resist is, but this is an interesting thing. The drummer here has become a little more annoying, a little more dangerous. They were already a high priority kill target. I think they will remain that. The knight. The knight spawns with 1 to 2 block now, which means they'll be a little slower to work down. Their debuff resist has gone up to 30. Their death blow resist has gone up to 60, making skills that get around death blow something that you may want to think about equipping if you're going to be running into a lot of knights. Biting Blade sees an increase in damage and crit, and then Flashing Blade has an increase of 1 maximum damage. The bleed is increased to 4, which is terrifying, but it won't consume taunt. This one seems like kind of a wash to me. Overall, though, I think the knight is a lot scarier than it was before. Which brings us to Bullseye Barret, another one of the champion mobs here. Bullseye Barret's speed has been increased to 3, stun resist increased to 30, debuff resist increased to 30, and then they fixed an issue where chosen target would consume order or crit tokens. That's a bummer for us. That's the short version. Now, chosen target will no longer target heroes that Barret cannot effectively reach from his position, which basically means that chosen target, which is a damage increase for Barret, is going to be much more likely to have a positive effect on his outcomes, which is bad news for us. And then Barret has a much higher likelihood to attack his chosen target, which again means that we're going to see a lot more damage coming out of this mob than we previously did. This mob was kind of dumb before this, and I think this is going to make it smart, and I think if it is smart, it is potentially dangerous. The General has a whole slew of changes. First, we see a reduction in HP. I think this is probably warranted. The General had a ton of HP, and while it was a fight that you could kind of like keep under control, I think that this is probably smart. Walking Dead is going to do more damage. I think this is probably to push players to be a little less like brain dead about just push back the growth, push back the growth, push back the growth, because if you didn't know, the Walking Dead happens more the more you push back the growth by hitting the taproot. Walking Dead will now also inflict 4 bleed, scary given how hard it hits, and then Nightmare is going to follow suit with Walking Dead and also do 10 to 20 damage. They updated some optics around how Tangled Growth works. They updated the way that the Strangle dot name, the token shows up, fixed a bug that apparently existed that I hadn't seen. There were some weird interactions apparently with pyro bombs and healing solve and the way that Whispering Darkness worked. I never ran into those because I never tried to do those things. And then the Stoil Stirs no longer ignores taunt. This is good news because that is the precursor to Walking Dead, and at least now you'll be able to get one of the Walking Dead hits, hopefully, on your tank. And then this last one, we're going to have to wait and see, but basically, Taproot can no longer be affected by non-resistible debuffs such as Tracking Shot. Tracking Shot's dodge prevention. I don't fully know what this means. I think what it might mean, and this is a bit of speculation here, is that maybe the Infernal Flames and or low Torchlight will sometimes cause the Taproot to get dodge, which would be very bad. But the other thing that I'm concerned about is just that we may run into a situation where certain consumable items can target the taproot, but no longer push back the growth. But we're going to have to wait and see on that one. Either way, this is, it's curious that they included that, and I am wondering why. Moving on to Pillagers, though. The Antiquarian is actually, hold on, let's not move on to Pillagers. Let's talk about the general overall. I think that these changes to the general are about a break even, give or take. I think that the change to Soil Stirs and the change to HP almost counteracts the fact that you're going to be hit harder. And I think that it's just going to make it a slightly faster fight, which I think is going to shift the balance to be a little less stress focused and a little more damage focused, but we'll have to wait and see. Now we can move on to Pillagers. So first of all, the Antiquarian. Flash Powder skill now correctly consumes combo. Good news, I guess. I didn't know that it was leveraging combo. But the Antiquarian remains largely unchanged. The Crack Shot is going to have a little more HP. That's a bummer because I feel like so often I was thrilled to see that a Crack Shot was dying to a particular dot tick. Speed has been increased from 1 to 4. The Crack Shot was always confusingly slow, but this is a bummer just because it's going to make it a little harder to kill it before it gets that first front mortar off. Then we have Blister Shot. Its minimum damage has been slightly increased, and Shell Shock now inflicts weak instead of daze. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's a red one. That might actually be green. Weak might be a better thing to be getting than daze from Shell Shock. I'm undecided. And then last but not least, the Mongrels are just a tiny bit faster. So those puppers are going to be getting their guards up that much quicker. More Pillager changes. The Firemouth, speed increased to 5, more stun resist, more debuff resist. Breath of Fire is going to be doing more burn, and Flash Fire can now be used in rank 3 and 4 instead of only in rank 3. This is just a lot of good news for the Firemouth. I think the burn increase is the thing that I am most nervous about. Hatchetmen are seeing their HP increase to 18, their speed decreased to 2, their bleed is going to be larger, and Wild Swinging is going to move them forward 2, which we're going to see that a few other places, I believe. It seems like abilities that restore the ordering of enemies are now a little more generous with how quickly they do that. You're not going to end up with 2 Hatchetmen in the back Wild Swinging and swapping positions over and over again. Now the Gaunt changes. The Lost Souls are seeing their HP increased to 13. Filthy Morsel is going to do less damage, but again is going to fix their move forward by 2, so they're going to be moving a lot more forward. Chomp is going to do more damage, but the stress is going to be reduced. This is probably good news for like the first fight and very few other places. Then the Urchin, that sneaky, stealthy friendo, is actually having its HP decreased to 11. Skulking Steps base damage is reduced by 1, and then Haunting Melody, the one that generally crits, is being increased by 1 also. More Gaunts. We have the Widow, whose HP is being increased to 13. Desperate Grab is going to not be usable from rank 1. I think that's what that means. And the base damage is reduced. And then Gruesome Reflection. This got a little garbled, and I don't really know what they meant in the patch notes here, but the horror check was increased, which I think means that there's more likelihood for the horror to generate stress. The standalone stress has been removed, which is good news for us. And I think now it also has a weak token, but I'm not sure exactly. And then Don't Look has less stress damage associated with it, or no stress damage. Overall, I think the Widow just got a lot easier and a lot less scary. The Woodsman, though, is a bit stronger here. More HP. Fell Tree is going to crit more frequently, thanks. Carved Toy is going to crit more frequently. And Protect Child is now going to move the big man forward. So Woodsman getting a bit of a buff. On to the Swine Folk. Numerous mashes have been adjusted, and then Carrion Eaters will now be encountered in the sluice. I think this is bad news just because I have this odd feeling that we're going to run into them and we're going to have a hard time getting rid of all the corpses, and we're going to have them doing their Carrion Eater things, which is going to be a little frustrating. But maybe a Carrion Eater is better than a pig. Hard to say. The Skulker, that's the name of the little pig. And this one's crit has been increased. Pig Sticker is going to have its minimum damage increased, so less of a damage range. It was really nice when they low rolled. It's a little sad that they're not going to do that anymore. Ragged Hook is going to be hitting 1 harder on the min and the max. Skitter is going to stealth more, which is going to mean that Corpse Clear is important if you have that like one last one, and now it has 2 stealth. And then while stealth, the Skulkers are going to gain 15% crit and 2 blight dealt. This is the big one. This is them making a play for stealth removal to be more valuable from my perspective. I think that previously you would just kind of sit there, you would taunt up, you would wait for the Skulker to become unstealth, and then you would kill it. Now having a way to remove stealth might be particularly important because every time they come out, they're going to crit you, they're going to hit you for a ton of blight and a bunch of damage. Bummer. Now on to the Brute. The Swine Brute has more bleed resist. Their mallet damage is increasing by a pretty decent amount, 2 on the top and bottom end. Squeal is now single target, their stress attack. I think that's really nice. The damage on Squeal, though, is being increased. It used to hit 2 targets, so this is net reduction if you consider the single target and the Squeal change. And then the Squeal stress damage is 2, which is a net break even. It was doing 2 but spread out. Now it's doing 2 more focused. Wilbur. More bleed resist, more blight resist, more burn resist. Obliterate Body is going to be hitting quite a bit harder. Obliterate Masses is going to be hitting quite a bit harder. Shattering Squeal is now single target, much like the Brute. Shattering Squeal can now target rank 3. It does more damage by just a little bit, and the stress damage is increased to 2, much like the other one. Overall, Wilbur's looking a little meaner than he did previously. The Tome of the Shambler. The first headline sums it up. The Shambler has become much more powerful. Uh-oh, this doesn't seem like a fun fight, I just want to say before we go through all the things. First of all, it's guaranteed to shuffle you at the start of combat. Womp womp. Seems familiar. Fights with the Shambler will reduce your torch to 1. We know that torch effects are now going to be confession specific and a lot more punishing. So we need to be ready for a lot of shenanigans and potentially a lot of like blind tokens and things like that showing up. It's not going to be fun. Surviving the fight will restore your torch to 100%. I was wondering about this because I was like, does that mean that I'm going to fight a Shambler in Confession 5 and then immediately have to fight an Exemplar the second my wheels turn? Good news that that is not the case. The Shambler now receives significant bonuses to damage and speed if you bring the Shambler's pet along with you. That's a fun little Easter egg. There will definitely be an achievement for killing the Shambler with the Shambler's pet. Mark my words. The HP is increased to 85 from 70. It spawns with 2 dodge tokens, so it's going to be a little annoying to get started on it. And its bleed and blight resists are increased to 50. Obdurious Advance has had its bleed increased and also its crit chance increased, and it will also be gaining 1 block plus token whenever it does it, although it no longer applies combo. Undulating Withdrawal similarly is going to be adding more blight. It is going to be gaining dodge from doing that, and it will also no longer apply combo. That should be a green, no longer applies combo. But anyways, the reason for this is now the fight will no longer begin with Stentorious Lament, and instead, Stentorious Lament will now apply combo to a random hero if no other hero already has it. And we know that combo is important because the next thing to talk about are the Shambler spawns or the Shambler tentacles. They are faster than they used to be. They have more bleed, blight, and burn resist. Their movement resist is lower, so they can be shuffled. Clapper Claw, the speed buff decreased, so it will have less speed. Wriggling Feast no longer applies weak to a target with combo. Wriggling Feast can no longer be used in rank 3 and 4. Wriggling Feast now grants the same buffs as Clapper Claw on a successful hit, and Wriggling Feast heals the Shambler for a static amount on a successful hit against the target. So this is the big one. The way that this fight is going to work is the Shambler is going to be doing Stentorious Advance, applying combo, and then the Shambler Tentacles are going to be using Wriggling Feast to feed health back to the Shambler. So you're going to have ways to handle combo. Yet again, making things like Holy Water useful for the Exemplar and now also useful for the Shambler. Overall, the Shambler fight looks like a nightmare. Doesn't look fun. We will invariably have it show up, and we will learn the hard way. But yeah, for now, we'll have to wait and see. On to the obsession or the confession bosses. If you haven't seen them and you are worried about spoilers, yet you've somehow made it an hour and 20 minutes into this video, good on you, and you can stop watching now. I won't be talking about a lot of other things, but the Shackle of Denials had a bug that was causing the chaplain to gain conviction. I kind of liked that. And they've made it a little more, they've made the Shackle of Denial a little easier to kind of like eke by at the end, because Paralyzing Fear will no longer cause a stun if you have 2 or less heroes. So if half your party is dead, you're barely hanging in there, you'll at least stop getting stunned. It's a pretty nice little kindness they're giving you. Then we have the Focused Fault, who got the Shambler treatment to a certain extent, but really most of this, from my reading, is the nerfs that I was expecting to see for the Focused Fault. So the first thing is, added a buff to the Focused Fault. Apply to attacker when crit. Combo when attacker has no focus token. So this is going to be generating combo on your heroes. Then we have Suppress will only be used when hero party has 2 or more combo tokens, rather than a random chance after limerence. So basically what this means is you won't get randomly suppressed, because suppress is awful. Suppress is brutal. So now you're going to have to manage your combo tokens, cough Holy Water again. Or if you don't manage your combo tokens, then you're going to get suppressed. Suppress will only target heroes with combo. So essentially it's like a secondary gaze type of thing. And it has to be with combo and no focus. So you can, if you have 2 people with combo, but one of them has focus, then only one person will get suppressed. And that seems like it's relatively likely. Reduce the number of debuff tokens applied by suppress. We'll have to wait and see what that is, but hopefully less stun, less weak, less blind. Reduced Limerence's base damage from a range of 20 to 40 to 16, and added a buff where it gains 25% damage per focus token on the target. So what this means is very interesting. What it means is that if you have a leper and you stack all 4 focus tokens on the leper, they are going to be hit for 32 damage consistently. That means that it will crit for more than that. But it basically makes the fight a lot more predictable and reliable, which I think is very interesting. Limerence now applies Vulnerable Token. Terrifying. That means that if you don't have a way to kind of handle that, the first Limerence is going to hit for 32, potentially, and then the second Limerence is going to hit for 64 or something like that. Not fun. But the silver lining here, the Healing Received debuff from Limerence can now be resisted. Debuff Resist just got a huge shot in the arm and is worth its weight in gold. Also, improve the academic's view of the description of suppression and limerence, so it's a little easier to understand. Seek and other skills that apply scene tokens now only target their mirrored rank and now ignore taunt and stealth, but are affected by blind. This is interesting. So for context here, the eyes will look at their mirror. So rank 1 eye and your one will both look at each other, and the furthest back eye will look at your furthest back eye. This is a funky one. It makes me wonder how you are supposed to manipulate gaze. The correct way may now be that you have to shuffle your tank around to pick them up, which is weird. But I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. The only other thing that they mention is basically that all of the eye's speed got reduced, and the eye that basically spawns the boss, the top level eye, will not grow to max size in round 1 or 2. So you have a little bit of time to kind of play around with stuff and get your footing underneath you. So that's the focus fault. I think overall this is a new fight. A lot of things have changed here. I can't fully read exactly where I think we land on this one. I think though, once we figure out the mechanics, this is going to be an easier fight than it previously was, but only time will tell. I expect the first time that we do it, it's probably going to be a bit awkward. On to the miscellaneous. We are almost there. Tooltip improvements, a bunch of tooltip improvements. I don't think it is worth reading through all of these. There's nothing particularly amazing. It sounds like they changed some of the phrasing on some tooltips. They improved the quirk tooltips. Always good things. Very excited by these little bits of fit and finish. And clearly there are a lot in this patch. In terms of fixes, I've gone through and I've highlighted the ones that I think are interesting, and these gray ones I think are... Read them if you're interested, but I'm going to highlight a few that stuck out to me. The first one is the Oasis Stress Heal choice won't be chosen by heroes who have 0 stress. Very cool. I hope that what this means is we're going to see more mineral-rich spring water on heroes that have 0 stress. Fingers crossed. We'll have to wait and see. Next one that I was excited about is fix an issue where reflected damage via the Redoubt skill would not credit the player with the kill if the damage was lethal. This is pretty niche, but it means that basically, like, if Reverberating Redoubt kills the Focus Fault and you needed on your Man-at-Arms to get the killing blow, now you'll get the killing blow. Still, it's kind of fun. I like these little, like, you know, these niche fixes that someone was frustrated somewhere because they didn't get 2 candles for that, or probably more. This next one was more interesting to me. A hero's run goal will now have an applied weight for path preference while moving through a region, i.e. a hero with a goal to visit Oasis will have that node preference when possible at intersections. This is cool because it means that as you look at your path, you can be like, okay, well, Dismas really wants to go to an Oasis, so if I go to this one, I can, you know, like, gain a stress heal on him type of thing. It's a minor tweak, but it's an interesting one nonetheless. Added item stacking info in the item tooltips. I think this is really handy. Every once in a while I buy something and I'm like, oh, I couldn't get a 5th laudanum to stack. Also, hopefully these tooltips are updated based on changes from the game, like the Leviathan's trophy that gives you +2 to stack size. It'd be really nice if that is live updated so you can be like, okay, right now I can have 6 laudanum. Then we have added game option for turning off the mini-map scouting auto scroll at region start. I am going to flip this on. I don't like the auto scroll type of thing. I would like to scroll through at my leisure rather than be auto scrolled. So excited about that one. And then the last note at the end of all of this is that Steam cloud saves are not yet implemented for the 1.0 release. Plan to add it in the very near future. Apologies for the inconvenience. So wait for it. It is coming for all you new Steam players. Oh, but this was a marathon video. We talked about it all. I am very excited for Monday to come around. I will be streaming starting at 9 a.m. Pacific on Monday. So if you want to catch me live and say hi, I would love that. please toss me a sub so you don't miss it. The thing that I am working on right now actively is boss guides. Clearly, some of the bosses changed, and I need to update those guides after I've had a few chances to fight them. But in the meantime, my librarian video is going live tomorrow. Very excited for you all to check that out. I've created infographics for each one of the boss guides that I think are really useful for kind of like at a glance, reminding yourself, oh yeah, how does the librarian work? What strategies should I think about? What items should I be trying to pick up? Those types of things. But anyways, enough self-promotion. Thank you again for watching. If this video was something that you were excited about and you enjoyed me rambling on for an hour and a half about all of the changes that are coming in 1.0, please toss me a like, toss me a subscription if you want more content like this, and let's all just get psyched up because Darkest Dungeon 2 1.0 is coming, and I think a lot of new people are going to be very excited about it and playing a game that I think is pretty awesome. For now, that's it for me. Thanks very much, and have a good one. Bye-bye.